You know, everyone tells you the hardest moment is when you discover an affair. The text messages you weren't meant to see, the lipstick that isn't yours, the late nights with hollow excuses. But sometimes the real devastation comes after. When family members start whispering that the child you've been raising isn't really your husband's. My name is Olivia Reeves, and if you asked anyone who truly knows me, they'd say I'm determined, fiercely loyal, and perhaps too forgiving for my own good. I loved Daniel Westbrook with every piece of my heart. He was charismatic, ambitious, the kind of man who commanded attention whenever he walked into a room. And for years, I believed we were building something unbreakable, until our son Noah was born and everything I thought I knew began to crumble. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember the day I brought Noah home from the hospital. 5 years ago now, but some memories carve themselves so deeply into your heart that time can't erode them. Daniel held our son with such tenderness, tears glistening in his eyes as he promised to be the father he never had. For a while, we were happy. Truly, deeply happy. Daniel would race home from work to give Noah his evening bath, would wake up for the midnight feedings without complaint, his face soft with wonder as he cradled our son. The trouble began when Noah turned 3 months old. Something shifted in Daniel. Subtle at first, like a shadow crossing the sun. He started working later, coming home after Noah was asleep. When he did hold our son, I'd catch him studying Noah's features with a strange expression, as if searching for something he couldn't find. When I asked what was wrong, he'd shake his head and say, "Nothing. I'm just tired." But it wasn't nothing, and we both knew it. The first time someone actually said it out loud was at Noah's first birthday party. We'd invited both our families to our suburban home in Greenfield, a modest 3-bedroom with a backyard just big enough for the inflatable bounce house we'd rented for the cousins. Daniel's mother, Eleanor Westbrook, had flown in from Phoenix. She'd always been cold toward me, viewing me as the reason her son hadn't pursued the law career she'd mapped out for him. But that day she was icier than usual, barely acknowledging Noah despite it being his celebration. During the party, I overheard her in the kitchen, speaking to Daniel's sister Rebecca. I'm just saying, Danny was always the spitting image of his father at that age. The baby doesn't look like anyone in our family. The room seemed to tilt. I pretended I hadn't heard, carrying the birthday cake out with shaking hands while singing louder than necessary. That night, after everyone left and Noah was asleep, I confronted Daniel. "Your mother thinks Noah isn't yours," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. I expected denial, outrage on my behalf. Instead, Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. "She's just being dramatic. You know how she is." "That's not a denial, Daniel." His silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, he said, "He doesn't look like me, Liv." The betrayal stole my breath. "He's 3 months old. He looks like a baby." "My family has strong genes. Everyone says so." We fought until dawn broke, harsh words giving way to tears, tears giving way to fragile reconciliation. Daniel apologized, held me close, promised he was just exhausted, stressed about the promotion he was working toward. I wanted so badly to believe him, to think it was just a momentary lapse of faith, rather than the first crack in our foundation. For a while, things improved. Daniel made an effort, coming home earlier, spending weekends taking Noah to the park, posting proud dad photos on social media. But each time we visited his family, I'd catch the whispers, the significant glances. Eleanor would hold Noah at arm's length, examining him like a counterfeit painting. Rebecca would ask pointed questions about my close male friends from work. By Noah's second birthday, the whispers had grown to barely concealed accusations. Daniel's cousin Melissa, 3 glasses of wine deep, cornered me by the bathroom. You know, she slurred. The family just wants what's best for Noah. A paternity test would clear everything up. I walked away, hands trembling, heart pounding. That night, Daniel slept in the guest room for the first time. It wouldn't be the last. The next 3 years passed in a purgatory of half-truths and unspoken accusations. Daniel and I existed in the same house but separate worlds, connected only through Noah, our beautiful, innocent son who somehow inherited my curly hair and nose but had Daniel's chin and the same way of furrowing his brow when concentrating. Not that anyone in the Westbrook family would acknowledge these similarities. I threw myself into motherhood and my career as an architectural designer, advancing to project manager at my firm while Daniel's resentment grew alongside his success. He'd made partner at his investment firm, but instead of bringing us closer, his achievement seemed to widen the gulf between us. The more successful he became, the more his family pushed him to resolve the situation with Noah, as if my son was a problem to be solved rather than a child to be loved. Through it all, I protected Noah fiercely. When he asked why we never saw Grandma Eleanor anymore, I'd tell him she lived far away. When he wondered why Daddy slept in a different room, I explained that Daddy snored too loudly. I built a fortress of half-truths to shield him from the ugliness of adult doubts, determined that he would never question his place in this world, even if the people who should have loved him unconditionally couldn't see past their own prejudice. My own family became our refuge. My parents, Judith and Michael Reeves, adored Noah without question or reservation. My younger sister Camille would drive 2 hours each weekend to spend time with us, bringing craft projects and taking Noah on adventures to the science museum or botanical gardens. My brother Thomas, a pediatrician, checked in regularly, always ending our calls with, "You're doing great, Liv. That boy is lucky to have you." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I wasn't sure if I believed in luck anymore, but I believed in love. I believed in the way Noah's face lit up when he mastered a new skill, in his belly laughs when we had living room dance parties, in his serious little voice when he explained the difference between Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus dinosaurs. I believed in the family we could be, even as the family we had begun to disintegrate. The breaking point came 3 months ago. I'd taken Noah to his kindergarten evaluation while Daniel was on a business trip. The school counselor had smiled warmly, going through Noah's assessment. "He's incredibly bright," she told me. "His vocabulary and problem-solving skills are well above average. He'll thrive here." Pride had swelled in my chest. I'd snapped a photo of Noah in front of the school sign to send to Daniel, keeping our fragile co-parenting communication alive. What I didn't expect was Daniel's response. Another trait he didn't get from my side of the family. Something snapped inside me. 5 years of accusations, of cold shoulders at family gatherings, of Eleanor's thinly veiled contempt, of Daniel's growing distance. It all crashed down like a wave. I'd spent half a decade defending my integrity, protecting my son from the very people who should have championed him. I was exhausted, heartbroken, and suddenly incandescently angry. That night, I packed 2 suitcases, one for me, one for Noah. I called my sister, who arrived within an hour to help us load the car. I left Daniel a note with 2 words: "We're done." We stayed with Camille for a week before finding a small apartment closer to my parents. Noah adjusted better than I expected, though he asked about his father every night before bed. Daniel called daily, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't name. Not quite regret, not quite anger, but something in between. He didn't fight for custody, didn't threaten legal action. It was as if some part of him was relieved to be free of the question that had haunted our marriage from the beginning. I filed for divorce 3 weeks later. The papers sat on Daniel's desk for days before he finally signed them, agreeing to my terms with surprising ease. joint custody, though Noah would live primarily with me. Child support that exceeded what the court would have mandated. It should have felt like victory, but instead, it felt hollow, as if I'd won a battle in a war that should never have been fought. Then came the call that changed everything. Eleanor Westbrook was turning 70, and the entire family was gathering at their lake house in Michigan for a weekend celebration. Daniel wanted Noah to be there. He should know his family live, regardless of what's happened between us. I almost refused. The thought of subjecting Noah to more subtle scrutiny, more whispers behind cupped hands, made my stomach turn. But then Noah found an old family photo album and asked questions about the grandparents and cousins he barely remembered. Looking into his innocent eyes, I realized I couldn't let the toxicity of adult conflicts rob him of his heritage, even if that heritage came with strings attached. "I'll bring him," I told Daniel. "But I'm staying too. He doesn't go anywhere without me." Daniel agreed with surprising readiness. Perhaps he understood that this was non-negotiable, or perhaps he was simply tired of fighting. Either way, 2 weeks later, Noah and I were packing for a weekend I was already dreading. The lake house was exactly as I remembered it, sprawling and rustic, with a wide deck overlooking the water and enough bedrooms to house the entire extended family. We arrived on Friday afternoon, deliberately late enough to miss the initial welcome gathering, but early enough to settle in before dinner. Daniel met us in the driveway, his face a careful mask of politeness as he helped with our bags. "I put you and Noah in the blue room," he said. "It has the bunk beds he always liked." The consideration surprised me. It was a small thing, but it suggested Daniel had thought about Noah's comfort, had remembered details about our son that I thought he'd forgotten in his cloud of doubt. Inside, the house buzzed with activity. Cousins chased each other through the hallways, aunts arranged flowers and platters of food, uncles clustered around the grill on the deck. And in the center of it all stood Eleanor, elegant as ever in a pale blue dress, her silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. When she saw us, her smile faltered for just a moment before she composed herself. "Olivia? What a surprise." Her tone made it clear that the surprise wasn't a pleasant one. "Grandma?" Noah broke free from my hand and ran toward her, uninhibited. By the years of tension he couldn't possibly understand. Eleanor stiffened momentarily before awkwardly patting his head. "Hello, Noah. My, you've grown." Daniel stepped forward. "Mother, I invited them both. This weekend is about family." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. For years, his silence had allowed his family to question whether Noah was family at all. Yet here he was, suddenly the diplomat. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "Of course, everyone is welcome." The words sounded rehearsed, empty. I felt a familiar pressure building in my chest, the need to escape, to shield Noah from the undercurrents of hostility. But before I could make an excuse, Rebecca appeared, wrapping me in a stiff hug that felt more like a restraint than a greeting. "Olivia, it's been ages. And this must be Noah. Goodness, he's gotten so big." She bent down to Noah's level, studying his face with an intensity that made my maternal instincts flare. I stepped closer, ready to intervene, but then Rebecca's expression softened with genuine warmth. "You know, you have your father's eyes," she said, glancing up at Daniel. "Exactly the same shape." The comment hung in the air like a question. Daniel shifted uncomfortably while Eleanor made a dismissive sound at the back of her throat. The moment stretched painfully until Noah, oblivious to the subtext, asked if there were any cookies. Rebecca laughed, the tension broken temporarily. "I think I saw some in the kitchen. Want to help me find them?" I nodded my permission, and Noah skipped off with his aunt, chattering excitedly about the lake and whether he might see frogs. Left alone with Daniel and Eleanor, I braced myself for confrontation. It didn't come. Instead, Eleanor excused herself to check on dinner preparations, leaving Daniel and me in awkward silence. "Thanks for coming," he finally said. "It means a lot to Noah." "I didn't do it for you." Daniel nodded, accepting the boundary. "I know, but I'm still grateful." He hesitated, then added, "My mother's been different lately, softer. I think turning 70 has made her reflective." I bit back a skeptical response. Eleanor Westbrook and soft weren't words that belonged in the same sentence. But I was here for Noah, not to reopen old wounds. "I hope you're right." The first evening passed in a blur of stilted conversations and forced smiles. Noah, thankfully, was too enthralled by his second cousins and the novelty of the lake house to notice the undercurrents. I kept him close, intercepting probing questions from relatives with practiced deflections. By the time I tucked him into the bottom bunk with his stuffed triceratops, I was emotionally drained. "Having fun, sweetheart?" I asked, brushing his curls away from his forehead. Noah nodded sleepily. "Daddy said tomorrow we can go on the boat, and Aunt Rebecca said there's going to be a surprise at Grandma's party." "That sounds exciting." I kissed his forehead, breathing in his familiar scent of shampoo in the outdoors. "Sleep tight, little explorer." "Mom?" His voice was suddenly small, uncertain. "How come we don't see Daddy's family very much?" The question pierced my heart. I'd known it would come eventually, but I still wasn't prepared. "Well, they live far away, and everyone's busy with work and school. But that doesn't mean they don't care about you." The lie tasted bitter, but it was kinder than the truth. Noah seemed satisfied, his eyelids already drooping. "I like having a big family," he murmured before drifting off. I sat beside him long after he fell asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest, thinking about family, what it meant, what it should be, how it could wound as deeply as it healed. Eventually, I slipped out, needing air that wasn't thick with memories and regrets. The deck was deserted except for a solitary figure at the far end, Rebecca, nursing a glass of wine and staring out at the moonlight reflecting off the lake. She turned at my approach, offering a tired smile. "He's a great kid," she said without preamble. "Smart, confident. You've done well with him." The compliment caught me off guard. "Thank you." Rebecca sighed, swirling her wine. "I owe you an apology, Olivia. Several, actually." I leaned against the railing, wary but curious. "What brought this on?" "Life. Perspective." She shrugged. "The realization that I've been complicit in something ugly." She turned to face me fully. "I never really believed Noah wasn't Daniel's. Not deep down. But it was easier to go along with Mother's suspicions than to stand up to her." The admission stunned me. For years, I'd imagined the entire Westbrook clan united against me, a solid wall of judgment and accusation. The idea that Rebecca might have had doubts about those doubts had never occurred to me. "Why tell me this now?" Rebecca looked down at her glass. "Because tomorrow at the party, things are going to change. And I wanted you to know that not everyone in this family has been against you. Some of us were just too cowardly to say so." "And what's happening tomorrow?" Alarm bells rang in my head. "Rebecca, if this is some kind of ambush, it's not what you think." She placed her hand over mine briefly. "Just be ready. And know that whatever happens, Noah deserves the whole truth. We all do." She left me there, confused and uneasy, the cryptic warning echoing in my mind as I stared out at the dark water. What truth was left to uncover after 5 years of accusations and suspicions? What possible revelation could change the damage that had already been done? Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to Noah's steady breathing from the bunk below, trying to piece together Rebecca's warning with the strange undercurrents I'd felt since arriving. Something was brewing beneath the surface of this family reunion, something that made my instincts scream caution. Morning came too quickly. Noah woke buzzing with excitement about the promised boat ride. Daniel arrived to collect him, standing awkwardly in the doorway as Noah gathered his swimming trunks and life jacket. "We'll be back by noon," Daniel said. The party starts at 2. I nodded, studying his face for some clue to what might be coming. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes suggesting he'd slept as poorly as I had. But there was something else there too. A nervousness, an anticipation that only heightened my unease. "Daniel," I began, but Noah chose that moment to declare himself ready, bouncing between us with infectious enthusiasm. Whatever I meant to ask dissolved in the face of his joy. "Be careful," I said instead, hugging Noah tightly before letting him go. "Listen to your dad, okay? No jumping off the boat." "I promise," Noah called, already racing down the hallway with Daniel following in his wake. Left alone, I showered and dressed methodically, choosing a simple blue sundress that had once been Daniel's favorite. Not that it mattered what he thought anymore, I told myself firmly. But some part of me wanted armor today, wanted to feel confident in the face of whatever was coming. The lake house was beginning to buzz with activity as relatives arrived for Eleanor's 70th birthday celebration. Caterers bustled through the kitchen, arranging elegant platters of food. Florists transformed the spacious living room with arrangements of Eleanor's favorite white roses and blue hydrangeas. I helped where I could, keeping busy to distract myself from the anxiety gnawing at my stomach. Around noon, I heard Noah's excited voice before I saw him, echoing through the house as he and Daniel returned from their boat ride. He raced toward me, his hair wild from the wind, cheeks flushed with sun and excitement. "Mom, we saw an eagle, a real one, and Dad let me steer the boat, and we went really fast, and there were these huge waves." I laughed, dropping to my knees to hug him, his joy momentarily washing away my concerns. "Sounds amazing. Did you remember your sunscreen?" Noah nodded emphatically. "Dad made me put it on twice. He said I have your fair skin." The comment hung in the air as Daniel approached. Our eyes met over Noah's head, and something unspoken passed between us. An acknowledgement, perhaps, of the genetic traits Daniel had spent years denying. He cleared his throat, looking almost sheepish. "He did great on the boat. Natural sailor." "Like his father," I said, the words a test of sorts. Daniel's expression softened. "Yeah, like his father."
Before I could process this shift, Eleanor appeared, immaculate in a pale grey dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "There's my birthday boy," she exclaimed, arms outstretched toward Noah. I blinked in surprise. In 5 years, I'd never heard Eleanor refer to Noah with such warmth, such casual possessiveness. Noah, still innocent to the politics of adult relationships, ran to her without hesitation. "Hi, Grandma, we saw an eagle." Eleanor actually laughed, a sound I'd heard so rarely I barely recognized it. "Did you now? How exciting!" She brushed his wild hair back from his forehead with a tenderness that made my throat tighten. "You should get cleaned up for the party, sweetheart. I hear there might be presents for good boys who help their grandmothers celebrate." Noah's eyes widened. "Presents? For me too?" "Of course for you too. Now scoot." She patted his back, as he dashed off, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "Olivia, could I speak with you for a moment, in private?" My defensive instincts flared immediately. "Actually, I should help Noah get ready." "Daniel can do that," Eleanor said, not unkindly. "This is important." Daniel nodded already, moving toward the stairs. "I've got him, Liv. Take your time." Trapped, I followed Eleanor onto the back deck, the same spot where Rebecca had delivered her cryptic warning the night before. The lake stretched before us, sun-dappled and serene, contrasting sharply with the turmoil in my chest. Eleanor settled into one of the Adirondack chairs, gesturing for me to take the one beside her. Her posture was rigid, hands clasped tightly. In her lap, the only sign that this conversation was difficult for her as well. "I owe you an apology," she began. The words so unexpected I almost didn't register them. A significant one. I remained silent, wary of what might follow. 5 years of judgment and cold shoulders couldn't be erased with a simple apology. Eleanor seemed to read my skepticism in my face. "I understand your hesitation. I haven't given you reason to trust my sincerity." She paused, looking out over the water. "I've spent much of my life prioritizing appearances over truth, Olivia. The Westbrook name, the family legacy. These things seemed paramount. When Noah was born..." She hesitated. "When Noah was born, he didn't look like what I expected a Westbrook to look like. And rather than questioning my own narrow expectations, I questioned you." The bluntness of her admission startled me. "You made my life hell," I said quietly. "You made Daniel doubt his own son." Eleanor flinched visibly. "Yes, I did that, and I've come to realize it may be the single greatest regret of my life." "Why now?" I demanded, years of hurt bubbling to the surface. "Why, after 5 years of treating Noah like he's some kind of interloper? After driving a wedge between Daniel and me that ultimately destroyed our marriage?" "Because I was wrong," Eleanor said simply. "And because at 70, I've realized that pride is a poor companion in old age, while family, true family, is everything." She reached into the pocket of her dress and withdrew a small envelope. "This arrived 3 weeks ago." I took the envelope cautiously. Inside was a folded paper with the letterhead of a medical clinic I didn't recognize. My eyes scanned the document, catching phrases like genetic screening and hereditary factors before landing on the paragraph that made my heart stop. "You had genetic testing," Eleanor nodded. "For Huntington's disease. My sister was recently diagnosed, and it runs in families. The doctors recommended I be tested, and that my children and grandchildren be informed of their potential risk." She pointed to the paper in my hands. "If you read the full report, you'll see they identified several genetic markers specific to my family line, markers that can only be passed down through blood relation." My mouth went dry as I began to understand. "You had Noah tested?" "With Daniel's permission, yes. A simple cheek swab while he visited last month. The test wasn't for paternity, not officially, but the results were quite clear." Eleanor's voice wavered for the first time. "Noah carries the same genetic markers as our family line. He is, without question, Daniel's biological son, my grandson. The confirmation I'd never needed but Daniel had always doubted crashed over me in waves. Vindication, fury, heartbreak, relief. They tangled together until I couldn't separate one emotion from another. "You destroyed my marriage over a suspicion that could have been resolved with a simple test 5 years ago," I finally managed, my voice barely controlled. "Yes." Eleanor didn't flinch from the accusation. "And knowing that doesn't change the past, but it might help shape the future, if you'll allow it." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'd like the chance to know my grandson, truly know him, to be the grandmother he deserves." She leaned forward, her usual composure cracking to reveal something raw and genuine beneath. "And I'd like the chance to make amends to you, Olivia, if that's even possible." Before I could respond, Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "Everyone's starting to arrive," she announced, "and Noah's looking for both of you." Eleanor rose, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. "We'll continue this conversation later," she said to me. "But please know that at the party today, I intend to set things right publicly. The truth deserves to be spoken aloud after being silenced for so long." She left me sitting there, The test results still clutched in my hand, my mind reeling. The evidence I never needed but Daniel had always demanded was here, in black and white. Noah was undeniably a Westbrook, carrying the genetic legacy of Daniel's family in his very cells. But it had come 5 years too late to save our marriage. Too late to spare Noah the subtle injuries of being treated as less than by his own family. I found myself walking toward the boathouse, needing space to process what I'd just learned. The weathered structure stood at the end of a long dock, its red paint faded by years of sun and storms. Inside, it smelled of lake water and old wood, fishing rods lined up against one wall, life jackets hanging from hooks. I sank onto a bench, the genetic test results still clutched in my hand. Part of me wanted to call my sister to vent the tornado of emotions churning inside me. Another part wanted to find Daniel and wave the paper in his face, demanding to know if biological confirmation had really been worth the destruction of our family. Instead, I sat in the dusty half-light of the boathouse, trying to find solid ground in a situation that kept shifting beneath my feet. The creak of the door startled me. Daniel stood in the entrance, silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun. "Everyone's looking for you," he said quietly. "The party's about to start." "Did you know?" I asked, holding up the test results. "About this?" He stepped inside, letting the door close behind him. "Mom told me last week. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." 5 years, Daniel. My voice broke on his name. 5 years of doubting me, of questioning Noah's paternity, of letting your family treat us like we were somehow frauds. And all it took was a cheek swab to prove what I've been saying all along. Daniel sat beside me on the bench, careful to maintain distance between us. "I know. And I've spent every day since seeing those results hating myself for what I put you through." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache, despite everything. I told myself it was about Noah looking different than expected, but deep down, it was my own insecurities, my fear that someone like you couldn't possibly be faithful to someone like me. The admission hung in the air between us. "I never gave you any reason to doubt me," I said finally. "Not once." "No, you didn't." Daniel's voice was thick with regret. "That was the worst part. I created a problem where there wasn't one, and then I let it consume everything good between us." I looked down at the paper in my hands, the clinical confirmation of what should have been an unquestioned truth. "So what happens now? We have scientific proof that Noah is your biological son. Does that magically fix everything? Do we just forget the last 5 years happened?" "No," Daniel said quietly. "I don't expect that. What I did, what my family did, it can't be undone with a piece of paper." He hesitated. "But maybe it can be a starting point. For Noah's sake, if nothing else." The mention of our son centered me as it always did. This wasn't just about Daniel and me, about vindication or apologies. It was about Noah, who deserved a family united in loving him, not divided by ancient suspicions. "Your mother says she wants to make some kind of public statement at the party," I said. Daniel nodded. "She's determined to make amends, to set the record straight with everyone who's ever heard her. Implications. I've never seen her like this, Liv. It's like the test results didn't just confirm Noah's paternity. They broke something open in her, some wall she'd built around herself. One revelation doesn't erase years of cruelty." "No, it doesn't," he agreed, "and no one expects you to forgive and forget overnight. But Noah deserves to know his father's family without the cloud of suspicion that's been hanging over him. He deserves grandparents who love him openly, cousins who accept him without question." He was right, and we both knew it. Whatever had transpired between the adults in his life, Noah was innocent. He deserved every opportunity for connection, for family bonds that extended beyond our broken marriage. "We should get back," I said finally, rising from the bench. "They'll be wondering where we are." Daniel stood too, his hand reaching for mine before he caught himself and pulled back. "Thank you for coming this weekend. I know it wasn't easy." I nodded, unable to articulate the complex emotions swirling. Inside me, together we walked back to the house in silence, the genetic test results tucked safely in my purse, evidence I had never needed but now carried like a shield. The party was in full swing when we returned, guests mingled on the lawn and deck, champagne glasses glinting in the afternoon sun. Noah was at the center of a group of cousins, leading what appeared to be an elaborate game involving water balloons and plastic cups. He spotted us and waved excitedly, his smile so bright it momentarily eclipsed everything else. Eleanor stood, near the catering table, commanding the room as she always had, but there was a new softness to her expression as she watched Noah play. When she saw us approaching, she straightened, a flash of vulnerability crossing her face before her composure. "Returned, there you are," she said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby guests. "We've been waiting to begin the formal part of the celebration." Whispers rippled through the gathering as people noticed Daniel and me standing together, speculation undoubtedly running wild about what our joint appearance might mean. Rebecca caught my eye from across the room, giving me an encouraging nod that somehow steadied me. Eleanor clinked her spoon against her champagne glass, the crystal sound cutting through conversations until the room fell silent. Noah broke away from his game to stand beside me, his small hand slipping into mine as if sensing the importance of the moment. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this milestone with me," Eleanor began, her voice stronger and clearer than her age might suggest. 70 years is a long time to collect memories, relationships, and, she paused meaningfully, mistakes. A ripple of surprised murmurs moved through the crowd. Daniel Westbrook was not known for admitting fallibility, especially not in public. As many of you know, our family has always placed great emphasis on legacy, on the Westbrook name, and what it represents. Her gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on old family friends who had witnessed the cold treatment Noah and I had received over the years. Sometimes that emphasis has led to poor judgments, to valuing appearances over truth, pride over love. Noah squeezed my hand, sensing the tension though he couldn't possibly understand its source. I squeezed back a silent reassurance. 5 years ago, Eleanor continued, my grandson Noah was born. She gestured toward where we stood. From the beginning, I made a grievous error, because he didn't immediately display what I considered Westbrook traits. I allowed doubt to cloud my judgment and my heart. I questioned his paternity, and in doing so, I caused immeasurable pain to his mother, Olivia, and created division within my own family. The room had gone completely still. Even the caterers had frozen in place, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Daniel moved closer to us, his presence a solid wall at my back, as if physically standing with us against the years of whispers and accusations. Recently, due to some health concerns in our family, genetic testing revealed what should have been obvious to anyone who bothered to truly see. Noah is, without question, my grandson and Daniel's son, a Westbrook through and through. Eleanor's voice caught slightly, a rare display of emotion. But even more importantly, he is a remarkable child, bright, kind, curious, qualities that have nothing to do with whose genes he carries, and everything to do with how his mother has raised him, often without the support he and she deserved. From our family. She lifted her glass higher. So today, as I celebrate 70 years of life, I want to publicly apologize to Olivia Reeves for the pain my pride and prejudice caused her. I want to acknowledge my grandson Noah as a beloved member of the Westbrook family, and I want to make a pledge that the remaining years of my life will be dedicated to making amends, to being the grandmother and mother-in-law I should have been from the beginning. The silence that followed was profound, thick with shock and emotion. Then, from somewhere near the back of the room, someone began to applaud. Others joined in, the sound swelling until it filled the space between the stunned faces and held breath moments. Noah looked up at me, confusion clear in his eyes. "Why is everyone clapping, Mom? What did Grandma mean about genetic testing?" I knelt down to his level, aware of dozens of eyes watching us. "It's grown-up stuff, sweetheart, but the important part is that Grandma Eleanor is saying she loves you very much and is sorry she didn't show it better before." Noah considered this with the straightforward logic of a 5-year-old. "Is that why she sent me an airplane toy last week? Because she's sorry?" "Probably," I admitted, touched that Eleanor had already begun her attempts at connection even before this public declaration. "Well, she doesn't have to be sorry," Noah declared loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Everyone makes mistakes. That's what you always tell me." A ripple of appreciative laughter moved through the crowd, breaking the tension. Eleanor's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she looked at Noah, really looked at him perhaps for the first time. "Out of the mouths of babes," she murmured, just loud enough to be heard. The party shifted then, the formal announcement giving way to cake and presents. Noah, satisfied that the boring grown-up talking was over, raced back to his cousins and the interrupted water balloon game. I found myself surrounded by Westbrook relatives, some offering awkward apologies, others acting as if the past 5 years of cold shoulders had never happened. It was overwhelming, this sudden shift from outcast to vindicated insider. I slipped, away to a quiet corner of the deck, needing space to process. Rebecca found me there, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Here," she said, offering one to me. "I think you've earned this." I accepted the glass gratefully. "Did you know what she was planning to say?" Rebecca nodded. "Not the exact words, but the general idea. Mother's been different since she got those test results. Reflective, regretful. I think facing her mortality with the Huntington screening forced her to evaluate what really matters." She paused, sipping her champagne. "That's no excuse for years of treating you like you were guilty until proven innocent, but it's something." "It's strange," I admitted. "Part of me wants to scream that it's too little, too late. The damage is done. Daniel and I are divorced. Noah spent the first 5 years of his life without knowing his father's family properly, all because no one would take my word as a mother." "And the other part?" Rebecca asked gently. I watched Noah across the lawn, laughing as he dodged a water balloon, his face alight with joy. "The other part recognizes that Noah deserves a chance at a full family relationship, regardless of the past. He deserves to know his cousins, his grandparents, his father's side of the family tree, especially now that there's this genetic health information to consider." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. Most people would have used this moment to twist the knife, to make everyone who doubted you feel as small as possible. Instead, you're still putting Noah first." "He's always been my priority," I said simply, "from the moment I knew I was pregnant." "Well, cheers to that," Rebecca said, clinking her glass against mine. "And to new beginnings, however complicated they might be." As the afternoon wore on, I watched Daniel with Noah, noting the easy affection between them despite the years of doubt. I observed Eleanor making a visible effort to connect with her grandson, her usual stiffness softening when he showed her how to properly aim a water balloon. I saw the Westbrook family reorienting itself around a truth that should have been accepted from the start, but was only now being acknowledged. It was messy and imperfect, this family reconciliation. Too much had happened for instant forgiveness, for seamless reintegration. But watching Noah move confidently among relatives who now saw him clearly, I recognized the first tentative steps toward healing, not just for him, but perhaps for all of us. As the sun began to set over the lake, casting long golden shadows across the lawn, Daniel approached me again, his expression cautious but hopeful. "Noah wants to show you something we found on our boat ride this morning," he said. "A heron, nest in the cove around the point. Are you up for a short cruise before it gets dark?" The invitation was carefully neutral, an offering with no expectations attached. 5 years ago, I might have read romance into the suggestion of a sunset boat ride. Now, I recognized it for what it was, a gesture of co-parenting, an attempt to create a positive memory for our son amid the emotional complexity of the weekend. "Sure," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "That sounds nice." As we walked toward the dock, Noah racing ahead with infectious excitement, I felt something shift within me. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a path toward something new, something undefined but potentially healing, not just for Noah, but for all of us who had been wounded by years of suspicion and doubt. The truth, captured in clinical language and genetic markers, had finally set us free. What we built with that freedom remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, I felt the weight of constant defense lifting from my shoulders. Whatever came next, it would be built on solid ground, not shifting suspicions. And for now, that was enough. The sunset boat ride marked a turning point, though I didn't recognize it fully at the time. Noah stood at the bow, pointing excitedly, as we approached the hidden cove where the heron had built its nest. Daniel navigated carefully, cutting the engine as we drifted closer to the tangle of branches where the magnificent bird perched, its long neck curved in an elegant S-shape. "See, Mom?" Noah whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Dad said herons are solitary birds. They like to be alone, but they always come back to the same nest every year." I caught Daniel's eye over Noah's head, the metaphor not lost on either of us. "They're loyal," I said softly, "and patient." Daniel's smile was tentative, tinged with regret. Some lessons come too late. We watched the heron for nearly half an hour, Noah asking questions that Daniel answered with surprising knowledge about local wildlife. As the light faded, painting the lake in shades of purple and amber, I observed them together, the identical way they tilted their heads when contemplating something, the same thoughtful pause before speaking. Signs that had always been there for anyone willing to see them. On the ride back to the dock, Noah fell asleep against my shoulder, exhausted from the emotional day and outdoor activities. Daniel cut the engine as we approached, letting us drift. The final distance. "Thank you for today," he said quietly, "for giving my mother a chance to make amends, for not telling Noah about everything." I stroked our son's hair, his peaceful weight against me, a reminder of what mattered most. "I didn't do it for your mother or for you. I did it for him." "I know." Daniel's hands were steady on the wheel, but his voice wavered. "That's what makes you a remarkable mother, Liv. You've always put him first, even when I couldn't see past my own insecurities." He hesitated. "I've been seeing someone, a therapist, trying to understand why I was so quick to doubt, so willing to believe the worst instead of trusting what we had." The admission surprised me. Daniel had always dismissed therapy as paying strangers to listen to your problems. This was yet another shift in the man I'd once thought I knew completely. "Is it helping?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Yes." He looked out over the darkening water. "I've had to face some ugly truths about myself, about how my father's multiple affairs affected my ability to trust, about how I've spent my life waiting for disappointment because it felt safer than hoping for happiness." I absorbed this in silence. During our marriage, Daniel had rarely spoken about his father's infidelities or the impact they'd had on his childhood. Now his willingness to examine these wounds felt significant. Too late for us, perhaps, but important for his relationship with Noah moving forward. "I'm not telling you this to make excuses," he continued. "Nothing excuses how I treated you, how I let my family treat you. I'm telling you because I want you to know I'm working to be better, to be the father Noah deserves, even if I failed as the husband you deserved." The dock appeared before us, illuminated by soft lanterns that cast golden pools on the dark water. Daniel skillfully guided the boat alongside it, securing the rope to the cleat with practiced ease. "I don't know what happens next," I admitted, as he helped me step onto the dock, Noah still sleeping in my arms. "This weekend has been a lot to process." "No pressure," Daniel said quickly. "I'm not asking for reconciliation or forgiveness, just maybe a new beginning as co-parents, a chance to build something healthy for Noah's sake." I studied his face in the lantern light, searching for the man I'd once loved so completely. He was still there, beneath layers of regret and newfound self-awareness, but we were both different people now, shaped by pain, perhaps wiser for it. "One step at a time," I said finally. "That's all I can promise." It seemed enough for him. He nodded, relief evident in the relaxing of his shoulders. Together, we carried Noah back to the house, a fragile truce forming between us as we focused on the child we both loved beyond measure. The remainder of the weekend passed with tentative interactions and careful conversations. Eleanor made visible efforts to connect with Noah, sitting patiently through his detailed explanations of dinosaur species and asking thoughtful questions about his kindergarten experiences. I watched their burgeoning relationship with complicated emotions. Gratitude that Noah was being embraced by his grandmother at last, lingering resentment that it had taken scientific proof to earn that embrace. By Sunday afternoon, as we packed our bags to return home, the Westbrook family dynamics had shifted like tectonic plates, subtle movements with profound implications. Rebecca hugged me goodbye with genuine warmth. Eleanor pressed a small package into my hands, murmuring, "For when he's older, so he knows his heritage." Inside was a delicate silver pocket watch that had belonged to Daniel's grandfather, engraved with the Westbrook family crest. A peace offering, an acknowledgement, a tangible symbol of Noah's place in the family lineage. I accepted it with a gracious nod, tucking it safely into my purse beside the genetic test results that had catalyzed this transformation. As Daniel helped load our luggage into my car, Noah ran one last race around the lawn with his cousins, his laughter carrying across the summer air. I allowed myself to imagine future visits, holidays, summer vacations, birthdays, where Noah would be fully embraced as a Westbrook, no asterisk attached to his belonging. "I'll bring him by next weekend," Daniel said as he closed my trunk. "If that's still okay." I nodded. "He'd like that. He's been talking about the Science Museum exhibit on space exploration." "It's a date. Daniel flushed. "It's a plan." The slip revealed how careful we were still being with each other, how conscious of boundaries and new territories. I offered a small smile to ease his embarrassment. "Drive safely," I said, sliding into the driver's seat. Noah bounded over for a final goodbye hug from his father, then climbed into his booster seat, immediately launching into a detailed account of the farewell game of tag. As we drove away, I watched the Westbrook Lake House recede in my rear view mirror. The extended family gathered on the porch waving goodbye. Something had ended this weekend, but something else had begun. Something tentative and undefined, but possibly healing. The drive home gave me time to reflect, Noah's chatter, eventually giving way to sleep in the back seat. I found myself thinking not just about the weekend's revelations, but about the 5 years that had preceded them, years I'd spent defending my integrity, protecting Noah from rejection, building a life shaped by others' suspicions. Those years had forged something in me that couldn't be undone even with vindication. I had discovered reserves of strength I never knew I possessed, had learned to stand firm in my truth even when everyone around me questioned it. I had become, out of necessity, a woman who didn't require external validation to know her own worth. That transformation was permanent, I realized. The DNA test might have changed the Westbrooks' perception, but it hadn't changed my reality. I had always known who Noah was. I'd always been certain of my own truth. The difference now was that I no longer carried the burden of trying to convince others. We arrived home just as dusk was settling over our small apartment building. Noah woke as I parked, rubbing his eyes and looking around with momentary confusion. "Are we home?" he asked sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart, we're home." He unbuckled himself and helped me carry in the lighter bags, chattering about when he might see his cousins again, how Grandma Eleanor had promised to send him books about birds after he'd shown interest in the heron. "Did you have a good time?" I asked as I tucked him into bed later, his favorite dinosaur pajamas rumpled and his curls still damp from his bath. Noah nodded earnestly. "The best. Daddy says, next time maybe we can stay for a whole week." He paused, his expression suddenly serious beyond his years. "Mom, why didn't we visit Grandma Eleanor's house before, when I was little?" The question pierced me. I'd known it would come eventually, but had hoped for more time to prepare. I sat on the edge of his bed, considering how much truth a 5-year-old could or should handle. "Sometimes grown-ups don't get along very well," I said carefully. "Grandma Eleanor and I had some disagreements, and it was easier to stay apart for a while. Because of me." Noah's intuition sometimes startled me, because they thought I wasn't Daddy's real son. Shock rendered me momentarily speechless. "Noah, where did you hear that?" He picked at a loose thread on his dinosaur quilt. "I heard Aunt Rebecca talking to Uncle James at the party. She said everyone was wrong about me not being a real Westbrook, and now there was proof." He looked up, his eyes wide and vulnerable. "What does that mean, Mom? Was I not real before?" My heart constricted painfully, despite our best efforts. To shield him from adult conflicts, Noah had absorbed more than any of us realized. I took his small hands in mine, choosing my words with utmost care. "You have always been real, Noah. You have always been exactly who you are, my son and your father's son. The most real, most important person in our lives." I squeezed his hands gently. What Aunt Rebecca meant was that some grown-ups made a mistake. They thought you might not be related to the Westbrook family by blood, like how you're related to me and to Grandma Judith. But they were wrong, and now they know that. "Because of the DNA test?" Noah asked. "Like on those police shows Grandpa Michael watches?" I bit back a startled laugh at his unexpected reference. "Something like that, yes. But Noah, listen to me." I lifted his chin so our eyes met directly. "Even if that test had said something different, you would still be your father's son. Family isn't just about DNA or blood. It's about love, about who shows up for you, about who makes you feel safe and valued." Noah considered this with the solemn concentration only children can truly master. "Like how Aunt Camille isn't really my aunt by blood, but she's still my real aunt because she loves me?" Relief flooded through me at his understanding. Exactly like that. "So everyone was just confused before?" he asked, piecing it together in his 5-year-old logic. "And now they're not confused anymore?" "That's right," I said, grateful for his simple framing of a situation that had caused years of adult pain. "They're not confused anymore." Noah nodded, apparently satisfied. "Good. I like having a big family. And Grandma Eleanor said she's going to teach me to play chess next time. She says all Westbrooks play chess." His acceptance of this new reality, this expanded family circle, was so uncomplicated, so free of the hurt and resentment that still lingered in my heart. I leaned forward to kiss his forehead, marveling at children's resilience. their capacity for forgiveness without even recognizing it as such. That sounds wonderful. I bet you'll be great at chess. Will you learn too, Mom? So we can play together. The question felt symbolic somehow, an invitation to participate in this new chapter rather than standing apart from it. Yes, I promised, I'll learn too. After Noah fell asleep, I sat in the quiet of our small living room, the events of the weekend replaying in my mind. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Got home safe. Thanks again for this weekend. It meant everything. I typed several responses before settling on a simple, Noah had a wonderful time. He's already talking about the next visit. As I set my phone down, I noticed the small box Eleanor had given me sitting on the coffee table. I opened it again, running my fingers over the intricate engraving on the silver pocket watch. A family heirloom, passed down through generations, now acknowledged as Noah's birthright. 5 years ago, I would have given anything for this acceptance, this validation. Now, I recognized it as important for Noah, but no longer essential for my own sense of worth. The journey through doubt and judgment had transformed me, strengthening parts of myself I hadn't known needed strengthening. The week that followed brought a steady stream of messages from the Westbrook family. Eleanor sent a handwritten note, expressing her profound regret and deepest admiration for how I'd raised Noah. Rebecca texted photos from the weekend, including several beautiful shots of Noah by the lake at sunset. Even Daniel's cousins, who had been among the first to whisper doubts about Noah's paternity, reached out with tentative overtures of connection. I responded graciously but cautiously to each, maintaining boundaries while leaving doors open. The vindication was sweet, but it didn't erase the years of isolation and judgment. Trust, once broken, could only be rebuilt slowly, with consistent effort and demonstrated change. Daniel kept his word about the Science Museum, arriving promptly. On Saturday morning, with tickets pre-purchased and genuine enthusiasm for the exhibition, Noah bounded into his arms, already rattling off facts about Mars rovers he'd learned from a library book. I watched their interaction with a bittersweet ache, wondering how different our lives might have been if Daniel had chosen trust from the beginning. "Would you like to join us?" Daniel asked unexpectedly as Noah ran to get his shoes. "There's an IMAX film about space exploration that's supposed to be amazing. My treat." The invitation caught me off guard. We'd established a comfortable co-parenting routine where Daniel took Noah for outings alone, returning him to me afterward. This suggestion of shared family time represented another shift in our evolving dynamic. "I have work to catch up on," I said automatically, the well-worn excuse slipping out before I could reconsider. Disappointment flickered across Daniel's face, quickly masked. "Of course, another time maybe." Later, watching them drive away, I questioned my reflexive refusal. Was I protecting myself from further hurt, or was I closing the door on potential healing? The question followed me throughout the day as I attempted to focus on design plans for an upcoming project. Just before dinner time, my phone chimed with a video call. Noah's excited face filled the screen, the museum visible behind him. "Mom, they have a real moon rock you can touch." And we saw the IMAX movie about astronauts. And Dad says maybe next summer we can go to space camp if I keep my grades up. His enthusiasm was contagious, his joy unencumbered by the complicated emotions that plagued the adults in his life. Behind him, I caught glimpses of Daniel, smiling fondly at our son's excitement. "That sounds incredible, sweetie. I can't wait to hear all about it when you get home." "Dad says we're going to bring you dinner," Noah announced, "since you had to work all day. Is that okay?" I hesitated, catching Daniel's apologetic shrug in the background. He leaned into frame briefly. "Sorry," he insisted. "We can just drop it off if you prefer." The old Olivia, the one still wounded by years of doubt and rejection, would have politely declined. But watching Noah's hopeful expression, I felt something give way inside me, a willingness to step tentatively toward a new kind of relationship. "Dinner would be nice," I said. "Thank you." They arrived an hour later, bearing containers of Thai food from my favorite restaurant, a detail Daniel had remembered despite our separation. Noah chattered throughout the meal about the museum, exhibits demonstrating his new knowledge of planetary rotations with salt and pepper shakers. Daniel and I exchanged amused glances across the table, momentarily united in parental pride. After Noah went to bed, Daniel lingered in the living room, helping me clear away the takeout containers. "Thank you for allowing this," he said quietly. "I know it's not easy. I'm doing it for Noah," I reminded him. "I know." He hesitated. "But I hope someday it might be easier for you too, not for the sake of getting back together," he added quickly, reading my expression. "I'm not presuming anything like that, but for peace, for letting go of the hurt I caused you." His self-awareness surprised me, as did his lack of expectation for reconciliation. The Daniel I had married would have pushed harder, would have assumed that one successful family dinner meant we were on the path to reunion. "I'm working on it," I admitted, "but 5 years of defending my integrity, of watching you doubt me without cause, that doesn't disappear overnight. I wouldn't expect it to." Daniel leaned against the counter, his posture open and vulnerable. "I just want you to know that I'm committed to rebuilding your trust, whether as co-parents or potentially friends. Someday, you and Noah are the most important people in my life, and I'll spend as long as it takes proving that to both of you." There was a steadiness to him that I hadn't seen before, a patience that spoke of genuine change rather than temporary contrition. I found myself wondering if the proof of Noah's paternity had freed something in Daniel too, not just from doubt about his son, but from deeper patterns of insecurity and fear. "One day at a time," I said, echoing my words from the lake house. "That's all any of us can do." He nodded, accepting these terms without pushing for more. As he gathered his jacket to leave, he paused by the door. "My therapist suggested something that's been helpful for me. Each night, I try to identify one thing I'm grateful for about that day, no matter how small. Today, it was sharing a meal with you and Noah, seeing him so happy to have both his parents together, even just for an hour." His smile was tentative but genuine. "Good night, Olivia." After he left, I stood in the quiet apartment turning, his words over in my mind. Gratitude had been a distant concept during the worst years of our separation, when bitterness and hurt had occupied so much space in my heart. But watching Noah flourish under the newfound acceptance of his father's family, seeing Daniel's efforts to become a better father and co-parent, I found that gratitude wasn't as elusive as it had once seemed. That night, before sleep claimed me, I identified my own point of gratitude, not the vindication that DNA had finally provided, but the strength I had discovered within myself through years of standing alone in my truth. That strength would serve me well, whatever the future held, whether it included a renewed relationship with Daniel or simply a more peaceful co-parenting arrangement. Either way, I was no longer defined by others' doubts. I had emerged from the crucible of those painful years, forged into someone stronger, clearer, more authentically myself than I had ever been before. And for that unexpected gift, that transformation through fire, I was, surprisingly, grateful. The healing had only just begun, but for the first time in 5 years, I could glimpse a path forward illuminated by truth, strengthened by adversity, and guided by love for the child who had never been in doubt, at least not in my heart. Whatever came next, we would face it together, Noah, Daniel, and I, bound not just by DNA but by the deeper connections we were slowly rebuilding from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Seasons change, and with them, so do people.
As summer faded into fall, then winter, and finally bloomed into spring again. Something remarkable happened. Not suddenly, but in small, significant moments that accumulated like shells on a shoreline until they formed something beautiful and unexpected. Noah turned 6 in October, celebrating with his first truly blended family party. My parents and siblings mingled with the Westbrooks in the community center I'd rented, the previous tensions replaced by cautious but genuine warmth. Eleanor arrived with a chess set made of hand-carved marble pieces, a Westbrook family tradition she was determined to share with her grandson. My father, ever competitive, challenged her to a match that ended in surprised laughter and mutual respect. Standing in a quiet corner, watching these once separate worlds converge around the child we all loved, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Rebecca handed me a glass of sparkling cider, her expression thoughtful. "He's thriving," she observed, nodding toward Noah as he enthusiastically unwrapped gifts surrounded by cousins from both sides of his family. "You've done that, Olivia. Despite everything we put you through, you've given him the security to embrace all of this without fear." I sipped the cider, considering her words. Children are remarkably resilient when they feel unconditionally loved. Not all children are so fortunate. Rebecca's gaze lingered on Eleanor, who was showing Noah how to properly set up the chess pieces. Mother never talks about it, but I've always suspected her own childhood lacked that security. Perhaps that's why she clung so fiercely to the illusion of the perfect Westbrook bloodline. This insight into Eleanor's character surprised me. I'd never considered her as someone shaped by her own childhood wounds, only as the architect of the pain inflicted on mine. The realization didn't erase the hurt she'd caused, but it added a dimension of humanity to a woman I'd long viewed as simply cold and judgmental. "Understanding doesn't erase consequences," I said quietly, "but it helps make sense of them." Rebecca squeezed my arm gently. "You should write that down. The world could use more of your wisdom." Her suggestion lingered with me throughout the evening and into the weeks that followed. As an architectural designer, I'd always channeled my creativity into visual forms, buildings, spaces, environments. That shaped human experience. I'd never considered putting my thoughts into words, sharing the hard-won insights from my journey through doubt and vindication. On a rainy November evening, while Noah was having his weekly dinner with Daniel, I opened my laptop and began to type. Not with any specific purpose, just allowing the words to flow. My fears during those years of suspicion, my determination to protect Noah from the toxicity of adult conflicts, the strength I'd discovered in standing firm in my truth, even when no one else believed it. What emerged wasn't the bitter account of wrongdoing I might have written a year earlier, but a reflection on resilience, on the fierce power of maternal love, on the possibility of healing even after deep betrayal. I wrote about finding worth not in others' validation, but in the quiet certainty of knowing oneself. I wrote about forgiveness as a process, not a single act, a journey taken in small steps, with occasional backsliding but steady progress. I didn't show the document to anyone. It lived in a folder on my desktop labeled simply Reflections, growing longer as I added to it in stolen moments over the following weeks. The act of writing became a form of therapy, helping me process emotions I hadn't fully acknowledged even to myself. December brought Noah's first overnight stay at the Westbrook family home since the revelation of the DNA test. Daniel had invited him for a pre-Christmas weekend of baking traditional family cookies with Eleanor and ice skating on the lake if it froze solid enough. I'd agreed with only minor hesitation, recognizing Noah's excitement at being included in these family traditions. "Are you sure you don't want to join us?" Daniel asked when he came to pick up Noah, his invitation casual but sincere. "There's more than enough room, and Noah would love having both of us there." I smiled, appreciating the offer but certain of my answer. "I'm using the weekend to finish some design projects. Besides, this is your family time with Noah. He needs that." Daniel nodded, respecting my decision without pushing. As he helped Noah load his small suitcase into the car, I noticed how much more at ease they were together now. Daniel no longer studying our son's features for proof of paternity, simply delighting in their shared enthusiasm for winter adventures. The house felt strangely quiet after they left. I'd grown accustomed to our co-parenting arrangement, but Noah had never spent a full weekend away before. I used the solitude to work on my designs, to catch up with friends I'd neglected, and increasingly to add to my growing document of reflections. Sunday evening brought the sound of tires on the driveway, and Noah's excited voice calling my name as he burst through the door, cheeks still rosy from the cold. "Mom!" The lake froze and we went skating, and I only fell down 7 times, and Grandma taught me how to make snowflake cookies, and look what Dad got me. He thrust a small wooden box toward me, practically vibrating with excitement. Inside was a beautiful compass, its brass casing engraved with the words, "To help you find your way, no matter where your adventures take you." It was Great-Grandpa Westbrook's, Noah explained. He used it when he was an explorer in South America. Dad says he'd want me to have it now. I met Daniel's eyes over Noah's head, recognizing the significance of this gift. Another family heirloom, another acknowledgement of Noah's rightful place in the Westbrook lineage. Daniel shrugged slightly, a silent communication that such gestures would continue, not as apologies, but as the natural relationship between generations. "It's beautiful," I told Noah. "We should find a special place to display it in your room." As Noah raced off to unpack his weekend treasures, Daniel lingered at the door. "I wanted to ask you something," he said, his tone careful. "Eleanor is planning a family trip to Alaska next summer, a cruise, followed by a few days at a wilderness lodge. She wants Noah to come, to see the glaciers before they're gone. It would be 2 weeks in July." He hesitated. "She asked me to invite you too. Not as my +1, he added quickly, but as Noah's mother and in your own right. Separate cabins, separate arrangements, but part of the family trip." The invitation caught me off guard. Despite the improving relationship with the Westbrooks, I'd never expected to be included in their family vacations, especially not one as significant as this multi-generational journey. "You don't have to answer now," Daniel said, reading my surprise. "Just think about it. It would mean a lot to Noah, and to Eleanor, though she'd never admit how much." I promised to consider it, watching thoughtfully as Daniel drove away. The old wounds were healing, but scars remained, tender places that still required careful navigation. 2 weeks with the Westbrook family would test those healing bonds, would push me into closer quarters with people who had once caused me profound pain. Yet something had shifted in me over these months of tentative reconciliation. The anger that had once burned so hot had cooled, not to forgiveness exactly, but to a more tempered understanding of human fallibility. Eleanor's pride, Daniel's insecurity, the family's willingness to believe the worst, these weren't simply malicious acts, but expressions of deeper wounds and fears. Understanding didn't excuse the pain they'd caused, but it allowed me to see beyond it, to imagine a future where Noah could love all parts of his heritage without conflict. A future where, perhaps, I could find peace with the past without forgetting its lessons. January brought unexpected changes at work. My firm assigned me to lead the design team for a community center focused on family support services, a project perfectly aligned with my personal values. The opportunity to create spaces where families could find resources, connection, and healing felt almost too perfectly timed, as if the universe were aligning my professional and personal journeys. The project consumed my creative energy, but in the most fulfilling way. I found myself integrating insights from my own experience into the design, creating both communal spaces for shared activities and quiet corners for private conversations, ensuring the center felt welcoming to diverse family structures and situations. During a late-night working session, fueled by too much coffee and the pressure of an upcoming presentation, I found myself describing the philosophy behind the design to my colleague Marcus. Physical spaces shape our emotional experiences, I explained, sketching rapidly on tracing paper. A room can either divide people or bring them together, depending on how we design the boundaries and transitions. Marcus studied the drawings thoughtfully. You should write this down, Liv. Not just the technical aspects, but the psychology behind it. Your perspective on how spaces influence families is unique. His words echoed Rebecca's suggestion months earlier. That night, unable to sleep despite the late hour, I reopened my reflections document and began to reshape it. Not as a private journal, but as something more structured, more purposeful. I wove together my personal journey with my professional insights, exploring how physical and emotional architectures intersect in family dynamics. By February, what had begun as private processing had evolved into a manuscript of sorts. Part memoir, part design philosophy, part guide for navigating family healing after profound breaches of trust. I shared it tentatively with my sister, Camille, whose background in psychology made her an ideal first reader. "This is powerful, Olivia," she said over coffee after reading the draft. "It's not just your story. It speaks to anyone who's had to rebuild after betrayal, anyone who's had to stand in their truth alone." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "You should publish this." I laughed off the suggestion. "I'm an architectural designer, not a writer." "You're both," Camille insisted. "And your voice is needed. How many other mothers have faced similar doubts and accusations without the validation of a DNA test? How many families are torn apart by suspicion and pride?" Her words stayed with me as winter gradually yielded to early spring. I continued refining the manuscript in quiet evenings, increasingly seeing it not just as personal catharsis but as a potential bridge to others walking similar paths. March brought Noah's spring break and his first weekend at the lake house since winter had released its grip. Daniel had planned a father-son fishing trip, promising to teach Noah the same techniques his grandfather had taught him decades earlier. As I helped Noah pack, slipping extra socks and his favorite snacks into his backpack, I was struck by how routine these exchanges had become, how the pain that once accompanied each handoff had softened into a gentle melancholy, and sometimes even a warm appreciation for Daniel's growing commitment to fatherhood. "Mom?" Noah asked as he carefully placed his treasured compass in his jacket pocket. "Are you coming on the Alaska trip with us?" I stilled, surprised that he knew about the invitation. "I'm still thinking about it, sweetheart. It's a big trip." Noah nodded solemnly. "Dad says it's your decision, but he hopes you'll come. He said watching glaciers calve is better when you can share it with people you care about." The simple statement, delivered with a child's straightforward honesty, caught me off guard. Daniel and I had maintained a careful distance in our co-parenting relationship, never discussing our feelings beyond what directly affected Noah. This indirect message, filtered through our son's innocent perspective, felt significant. When Daniel arrived to pick up Noah, I found myself studying him with new awareness. The past year had changed him, not dramatically, but noticeably. The defensive edge that had characterized him during our marriage and early separation had softened. He carried himself with a quieter confidence, less concerned with appearances and more present in genuine moments. "Noah mentioned the Alaska trip," I said as we watched our son climb into the car. "I've been considering it." Daniel's expression brightened. "Really? That would be—" He paused, visibly reining in his enthusiasm. "That would be great for Noah." "Just for Noah?" I found myself asking, the question surprising even me. Daniel held my gaze steadily. "No, not just for Noah." He hesitated. "But I meant what I said when this all started, Liv. No pressure, no expectations beyond co-parenting. The invitation stands on its own terms, whatever you decide." As they drove away, I found myself at another crossroads. Not as dramatic as the one I'd faced during that revelatory family reunion, but significant nonetheless. The Alaska trip represented more than a vacation. It symbolized a willingness to move forward, to allow the Westbrooks back into my life not just as Noah's paternal family, but as people with whom I might build new, more authentic relationships. That evening, alone in the quiet house, I returned to my manuscript. The final chapter had remained unwritten, as if waiting for some conclusion that hadn't yet revealed itself. Now, words flowed as I reflected on the journey from betrayal to vindication, to the beginnings of genuine healing. I wrote about the courage required not just to stand firm in one's truth, but to remain open to connection even after being deeply wounded. I explored the difference between forgetting and forgiving, between erasing the past and learning from it. I contemplated the complex choreography of building new relationships from the ashes of old ones, finding solid ground where once there had been only shifting suspicions. As spring unfurled its tentative blossoms, bringing color back to the deity, world after winter's monochrome palette, my own life seemed to mirror this gradual renewal. The manuscript found its way to a literary agent through Camille's professional connections, resulting in cautious interest that both terrified and exhilarated me. My community center design received approval from both the firm and the client, launching the project into the next phase of development, and Noah flourished in the expanding circle of his family, moving confidently between my world and Daniel's, with the resilience of a child who feels securely loved from all sides. One warm April evening, as I worked in the small garden behind our apartment building, Daniel arrived to drop Noah off from their weekend together. Instead of the usual quick handoff, Noah begged for a few more minutes to show both of us the fishing lures he'd made under his grandfather's tutelage. We sat together on the garden bench, Noah proudly displaying his creations while explaining the purpose of each color and material with surprising technical knowledge. Daniel and I exchanged amused glances over his head, silently acknowledging that our son had clearly absorbed the Westbrook family's characteristic thoroughness. After Noah ran inside to call his grandmother and report on the fishing trip's success, Daniel lingered, his expression thoughtful as he surveyed my modest garden with its newly planted vegetables and flowers. "You've created something beautiful here," he said, gesturing to the organized beds and climbing trellises. "Out of nothing." "Not nothing," I corrected gently. "Just soil that needed attention and seeds that needed the right conditions to grow." Daniel nodded, understanding the metaphor. "Like us, maybe. As co-parents, I mean. We're growing something new out of what was once barren ground." The analogy struck me as unexpectedly apt. What had begun as the scorched earth of our failed marriage had gradually, with careful tending and patient commitment, transformed into something productive. Not the relationship we'd originally envisioned, but one that nourished Noah and, increasingly, brought moments of genuine connection rather than painful reminders of past wounds. "I've decided to join the Alaska trip," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "For Noah, but also for me. I think it's time to create some new memories with the Westbrook family, ones not shadowed by old suspicions." Daniel's smile was warm but contained, respectful of the boundaries we'd established. "I'm glad. It wouldn't be the same without you." As he left, I remained in the garden, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment of decision. The path from that devastating family barbecue where Noah's paternity had been openly questioned to this point of cautious reconciliation hadn't been straight or easy. There had been setbacks along the way, moments when old hurts resurfaced, when forgiveness felt impossible, when the easier choice would have been to maintain emotional distance while co-parenting from a safe remove. But in pushing through those difficult moments, in choosing the harder path of engagement rather than withdrawal, I'd discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. The capacity to hold others accountable while still remaining open to their growth. The ability to protect my boundaries without building impenetrable walls. the wisdom to recognize that healing often comes through connection rather than isolation. Most importantly, I'd learned that standing in my truth didn't require others' validation to be powerful. The DNA test had vindicated me in the eyes of the Westbrook family, but my worth as Noah's mother, my integrity as a woman, had never actually depended on that external confirmation. The certainty had always lived within me, unwavering even when everything around me seemed to question it. That night, I finally completed the manuscript, typing the final paragraphs with a sense of closure not just for the book, but for a chapter of my life. The truth doesn't need scientific proof to be valid. Sometimes it lives in a mother's unwavering certainty, in the quiet knowledge that transcends others' doubts. But when that proof arrives, when vindication finally comes, it presents us with a choice. We can use it as a weapon, wielding it against those who wronged us, or we can use it as a bridge, a path toward healing that transforms pain into wisdom and isolation into connection. I chose the bridge. Not because the hurt wasn't real or the injustice wasn't profound, but because remaining defined by that pain offered only the hollow victory of righteous anger. The true victory lay in reclaiming joy, in opening myself to new possibilities, in showing my son that even the deepest wounds can heal if we're brave enough to tend them with honesty and care. DNA may determine biological parentage, but family is built choice by choice, day by day, in the small moments of showing up and standing firm. Family is who sees you clearly when others are blinded by their own fears. Family is who remains when the storms of doubt have passed. Family is who chooses you again and again, even when that choice requires facing difficult truths about themselves. Today, I stand vindicated not just by science, but by time, by the slow unwinding of suspicion into understanding, by the gradual transformation of broken relationships into something new and unexpectedly meaningful. But more importantly, I stand whole, shaped by adversity but not defined by it, connected to others but complete within myself. This is the legacy I hope to pass to my son. Not that truth always prevails in dramatic moments of revelation, but that holding fast to your own truth, even when standing alone, builds a foundation nothing can shake. And that foundation becomes the ground from which forgiveness can grow, not as surrender, but as the ultimate act of reclaiming your own story. As I typed the final words, Noah called from inside, asking for help with his homework. I closed the laptop, leaving the completed manuscript to rest while I attended to the living, breathing reason for everything I'd endured and everything I'd learned. Tomorrow, I would send it to the agent who had expressed interest. Tomorrow, I would take another step toward sharing my journey with others who might find in it a reflection of their own struggles and hopes. But tonight, I would simply be present. With my son, would help him with his spelling words and listen to his excited chatter about the upcoming Alaska adventure. Tonight, I would appreciate how far we'd come from those dark days of accusation and isolation, how the painful questions about Noah's paternity had ultimately led to deeper certainty about what truly constitutes family. The DNA results had changed everything, yet in the most important ways, they had changed nothing at all. Noah had always been my son, had always been Daniel's son. The scientific proof had merely opened others' eyes to what I had known all along, that truth doesn't require external validation to be true, that a mother's certainty carries its own profound wisdom, and that sometimes standing alone in your truth is the prelude to finding yourself surrounded by those who finally see you clearly. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.